Nadine Dorries had not she's not made a verbal contribution in the House of Commons for more than a year. The last time she gave a written answer was when she laid down a statement, I think in September 2022, in the handover between like Johnson and Truss.
Mm-hmm.
She has not voted in the House of Commons since April. She no longer lives in her constituency. She has not held physical surgeries in her constituency. And all this entire time, I think you would look at those 5 things and go, well, Nadine Dorries is no longer acting as an MP. She has continued to draw her salary the entire time. The other 2 who resigned, Boris Johnson and Nigel Evans, at the time that she said she was resigning but didn't actually resign, they've had by-elections. She's, I think, waited until this weekend to do this because it means the by-election will fall on the Thursday immediately before the Conservative Party conference. I think the entire thing is deliberately intended to politically harm Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, for me, encapsulates everything that is fucking rotten about Westminster. Like, forget political representation, forget access to politics, like being able to talk to your MP about an issue or reading their resignation letter, because so this is a slight tangent. She didn't the typical way is write the letter to the Prime Minister. It will eventually get uploaded to the government website. You'll also tweet a photo of it, whatever. No, she gave it to the Mail.
Yep.
They put it on Mail Plus, which is behind a paywall. So, and actually, it turns out I don't think she actually wrote it to the Prime Minister. So she didn't send it to him. So initially, the only way you would have known that Nadine Dorries was resigning is if you're a Mail Plus subscriber. And so it's like all these things are a fucking game to these people.
Yeah.
It's my representation of Mid Bedfordshire is irrelevant. I am just going to use this to harm Rishi Sunak. Like, how fucking pathetic is that?
Yeah, I think it's also, I think the people, it's very easy to talk about this, and people have been talking about this as like a Westminster parlour game almost, so that's like the rivalry between Conservative factions. But there's actually, it's like a democratic deficit for the people in her constituency who haven't had a functional MP.
100%.
Imagine you had someone you had a really urgent need from assistance for your MP. You can't go to any other MP because they're not allowed to take on your casework. Imagine you had a genuine issue, something you needed urgent help with, and she's just fanning around on the telly.
Well, the Flitwick parish councillors,
yes,
turned against it, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they're kind of apolitical, right? They're sort of it's not like a local council, right? It's not. They're not like Labour or Tory, right?
Really?
They're local people.
Okay.
Local people.
Local
councillors for local people. Yeah. They turned on her and were like, get rid. Yeah, shocking. Utterly shocking.
But nothing's going to change. It's not going to be like. I think it's such. I just think Westminster stuff is so. There's like an immaturity to it. Like Nadine Dorries is in her 60s, has had a professional career. Don't know.
She's a very successful author. You know that?
No, I know that, but that's so.
Oh, she also half of the resignation letter was like her promo of her upcoming expose.
Oh yeah, that was really funny.
The deep state is taking down Boris Johnson.
I've realised that my work as an MP is incompatible with my upcoming book, which is available at all good bookshops for a very reasonable price.
Yeah.
Even you shouldn't be able to promote your other work in your resignation letter.
You try and stop her.
But also, it's just quite embarrassing.
Massively. Oh, something else I thought was really revealing in that letter. One of the final lines was, it was like you've abandoned the fundamental principles of conservatism, which I found really interesting. Because, right, Dorries is the die-hard Boris Johnson, die-hard Boris Johnson. That's what all of this is about. First of all, the backstabbing of him by Rishi and other Tory politicians. She can't believe that they turned on him. And then his blockage of her peerage that Johnson wanted to give her. That's what all of this has, happened because Boris Johnson, for me, not your archetypal conservative. Socially liberal, as Mayor of London, backed immigration, very pro-gay rights. I don't think anyone really sincerely believed that he was a supporter of Brexit. He was sort of chance your arm, see which one happens, follow the political expediency. I think if you were to compare, and then very interventionist, right, in terms of the economy, high tax, at least the language of levelling up was pretty. Although I suppose you could probably cast that in sort of the paternalistic, sort of more old school Toryism. But we don't need to go into a fucking ideological discussion about that. Rishi Sunak, conversely, incredibly socially conservative, banning fucking laughing gas. Not. Suella Braverman, when she said that shit about like Pakistani men like abusing white girls,
like rape gangs or something.
Yeah. He had no problem with that. Blocking the Scottish government's attempt to make self-ID easier. I don't think that was naked politics. He genuinely, has a problem with trans rights. And then there's the stuff around schools as well that he's trying to do with Kemi Badenoch, and also changing the Equality Act to focus on specifically, quote, biological sex rather than, again, in terms of self-ID. I think socially, incredibly conservative. Fiscally, incredibly conservative. There's a question about, he's also a Thatcherite, and so there's a question actually of whether you could describe Margaret Thatcher as a conservative or not. I think, a neoliberal, etc., is probably slightly more relevant. Anyway, to say Rishi Sunak is not a conservative, for me, boggles the mind. Because I think he's the most conservative Prime Minister we've had, well, at least since Thatcher.
Well, let's also look at his cabinet. Like, look at the company he keeps. Like, Badenoch, Braverman. If you weren't a Conservative, would you have some of the most right-wing, prominent Conservative MPs in your cabinet or not? There's talk about like a rivalry between like Braverman's camp and Sunak's. Maybe they're in the same camp. Of like, it's
yeah.
Would you put one of a rival you disagreed with as Home Secretary? It allows him to pass the buck of these quite unpleasant decisions, but ultimately it's his responsibility as well. Everyone in cabinet is responsible for all the decisions that the government makes.
There is that collective responsibility, but there's also again, what we're talking about there, the racism of the British Pakistanis, or the frankly like atrocious shit in relation to refugees and small boats. He's the Prime Minister. Like, she is saying and doing those things with his blessing. He's been invited to disavow her remarks on multiple occasions. He never has. Yeah. It's because it's politically expedient to have her make them, because she's the one who then draws the flag for them. But he sincerely agrees with her. Yeah.
If there was a different Home Secretary, do we think the Home Secretary would be more kind to refugees?
No.
Yeah. He's the architect of this government, and I think there's a real. I find it quite infuriating when you see profiles of Rishi Sunak talking about like, oh, he's like a competent technocratic bro. It's like, no, he's not. He's a very right-wing person at the head of a very right-wing government.
He gives off the vibe of being socially progressive, I think, partially because of the Silicon Valley thing. I think partially, and incorrectly, people go, oh, he's an ethnic minority, therefore he will have liberal attitudes. And somewhat bizarrely as well, because of the contest with Liz Truss, where everyone thought that Liz Truss was Thatcher remade, and therefore Rishi Sunak was like a fairly like woolly, cuddly, nice, liberal Tory. Rishi Sunak has been... He's a paid-up Brexiteer, right?
Yeah.
Liz Truss had a fucking Damascene conversion after the referendum result. But yet somehow she managed to position herself as the more right-wing of the two.
Yeah.
Peculiar.
Very peculiar.